Okay, welcome to our open process automation panel. What I'll do is introduce the panelists, and as I promised, we will let the presenters from the previous session answer any questions that you have first. And then we have a set of questions that we've developed to talk about open process automation. I'd like these folks to share their response to some of those questions. And then again, we'll open it up to the floor for your own questions for the panelists. So let me introduce the panel. From my left is David DeBari. He was the presenter from the last session from ExxonMobil on their proof of concept pilot and test bed. Igor Stolz from Evonik, head of their electrical and I&C organization. He is also the presenter on the MTP programs of Evonik in the last session. In the middle is Julie Smith. Julie Smith is the head of DuPont's Center of Excellence for Process Automation and Control. And then next to Julie is Jacco Opmeer, who is from Shell Global Solutions, right? Shell Global Solutions. He's managing a program called DCS of the Future there and is involved in the Open Process Automation Forum. And finally, Stephen Smith, last but not least, is the manager of support, of control system support at Eastman Chemical. So we have a pretty distinguished panel here. I think there's a lot of good questions you could ask these folks. But like I said, I'll start if someone has a question specifically on the presentation by ExxonMobil on their test, on their pilot and test bed, or for Evonik on the MTP pilots that they did. If there's a question on that right now, let's get it on the floor. So anyone? Yeah, please take the mic and identify yourself.
Yeah, my name is Carl Mössing. I'm with Evonik. My question was for Mr. DeBari. I saw in your slide, and I'm talking from memory here, that the biggest challenge was the systemness. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yes. So the term systemness, we were in our early days in the Exxon team before the forum. You know, one of the constraints that we thought that a system like this would have is that it had to have a systemness that approached what we're used to in terms of existing systems. Now, I realize proprietary gives tremendous advantage to the systemness. So when we built the system with heterogeneous parts, we had to integrate the historian. We had to integrate the alarms and messagings part of the system. We had to incorporate the cybersecurity pieces. It wasn't delivered as a package as you would buy a system. So I guess one of the things that we sort of learned from building a system from scratch, heterogeneous parts, is that these things have to be considered as part of the process. You know, when you get a system out of the box, it comes with a lot of features, and realizing that some of those features are quite entertaining to implement and integrate and get working well. And I have my own theory about proprietariness and why vendors stopped when they started working versus keep going in some open way, because you can bang your head on the wall quite a while to get things to work. And we've all integrated separate systems, so you know what integration difficulty is. It's a level of integration that I think we sort of lose track of, and we should, you know, tip our hats to the vendors for providing that level of integration to us in their packages. We just can't do the proprietary form of it anymore. It needs to be open. So systemness is really we had a conversation. What if you had 20 different devices and you needed 20 different engineering environments to configure them? I mean, just like when you have a PLC versus a DCS and you have a different brand PLC on some other skid, you've got to deal with that. And we said, well, we've got to find a way to look at the standards and look at what IT does in those kind of environments. And so you don't have many engineering environments and tools. And I mean, how many do you want to learn? How many can you learn and be good at, right?
Mm-hmm. Other questions from the floor for the presenters? Don't ask me. I was hoping some of the DCS suppliers might be hearing you say that, Dave. It's on tape, so they will. Anything else? And then we'll transit. Oh, there's a question up here. Mark has a question.
Maybe you could highlight some of the differences and similarities of the standards efforts for OPA and NAMUR. So there was the integration slide, and it seemed like there was, some side-by-side and complementary things for those of us who don't follow it every day. Explain how it's not duplicative and it's complementary.
Okay, does anybody want to take that? I don't know, maybe Igor, do you want to talk about the NAMUR efforts and how they complement, or?
Well, I don't. That's a tough question.
Yeah, it is. It is a good question.
I think the two pieces kind of developed by themselves. I think the idea was probably ripe, and so similar ideas started at the same time. And then I think we realized there is something happening that now from the European side, and I realized there's something going on in the US with OPA, and then we had a closer look and realized, those things can work well together. They are not excluding each other. Actually, it makes sense to work together because some standards that we have been writing might be useful for the other side. So that has actually triggered some changes also in the standardization bodies in Germany. Leon Obers was mentioned. He's working on actually changing the way those standards are written. Typically, they were written in German, and once they were finalized, they were translated into English. If we want to come together more quickly, it needs to be the other way around. While we are developing, we should do that in English, so we can share them very early. So one party is not waiting on the other because, at one point patients might run out, and then then OPAF might write some others their own standards, and then we would have different standards, and that's not what we want. I think that's what we realized on both sides. We need to join forces here because there's only so many hours in a day that we can invest in this. So everything that we can reuse is highly welcome.
I think both the NAMUR open architecture is about open interfaces, and OPAS is about open interfaces. And I think it was 2 years ago, Dr. Michael Kraus came and gave a presentation about how the NAMUR open architecture and OPAF efforts are very complementary. And I'll tell you, my own opinion is we share a common fence where the NAMUR, the words they have in describing what they're doing, they want to leave the control system part alone and create openness to all the business systems and the capabilities that we want to use outside the control system. And OPAS really kind of wants to play in the control system part and create open interfaces. And so I think they're very complementary. I was watching the presentation earlier with MTP, and it's just, there's so many similarities to feature sets that we want and capabilities that you can see it. It's really interesting. And thankfully, when Dr. Michael Kraus gave his presentation, I was like, I get it now. We are not opposed or against or even overlapping, really. We just share a common fence, and they're working one side of the fence and we're working the other. And we've made sure their openness allows us to move through the fence easily as well. So It's interesting. I think there's a lot of groups that are kind of working towards the same goal, and some are very narrowly focused and some are wider focused, but I think all of us have the same long-term vision of what we want. In end users, we want all of them to succeed.
I don't think
Oh, no. So the OPAF, the forum itself has liaison agreements with other organizations that are solving these problems, because in general, if they solve it, we'll just use it. We don't have to try and solve it ourselves. So there's a lot of complementary parts to that. And a lot of organizations are asking us, well, what exactly do we need to put in our standard to make it compatible with what we're thinking in the OPAF, the OPAS standard? I think it's very interesting that we're all working together and we have the same goals. I mean, each business will decide which technologies and how much innovation they use and where they want to get their value. So they'll choose the products, and the fact is the standards will be complementary.
Anyone else on the panel have any comments on that? Julie?
Yeah, well, just to add on, I think, the OPAS standard, as Dave mentioned, goes farther, and it goes down into level 2 and level 1, and breaking up that proprietary layer. And for our industry, that's really important because that addresses two big pain points. One is systems integration, which has been discussed before, particularly integration of skids, which is how we grow our businesses. The greenfield plants are largely a thing of the past. I mean, it's very rare to build a whole new plant. Usually you incrementally build on an existing plant, and this is largely through skid integration, which is very difficult now because there's no standard. The other part is the application portability at layer 2. I think that's, again, if you don't touch anything on the control side of the fence, and you're not going to get that application portability, which is really inhibiting the sharing that we have between sister sites now. They have making very similar products, and they could benefit from the same strategies, but because they happen to be on different vendor platforms, they can't share, and it's very difficult. There's a lot of extra cost involved. So OPAS is really going to solve those pain points for us. We hope.
Okay, any other questions on the prior presentations? Going once, going twice. Okay, we'll move on then. Thank you very much. I put together a set of questions for this panel, and I really wanted to focus on the issue of support. I talked to a lot of end users in the past few months about support for DCS, and I found that there was a pretty wide range of opinion or happiness, let's say that, in terms of the situation that they were in. And we talk about DCS as being kind of like getting married. You're in a partnership with your customer and supplier for many years, inevitably, and some of them work out very well and some not so well. So while I don't like to do this, I'd really like to just ask each of you to, because you have that kind of responsibility, especially for support, to kind of encapsulate for the audience here, if you would, from 50,000 feet, what your firm does for automation support, and if it's uniform or non-uniform, and what you do globally. And could you just kind of give us a perspective on that support, what you do internally, externally, through the vendors, that kind of thing? And I don't know, would somebody like to start? I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but Steve, you want to say something?
Sure, I'll say that I'll answer this question from the present much differently than I would have answered it 10 years ago. When you look at Eastman Chemical 10, 15 years ago, we were handling almost all of our support internally, and still to a large degree are. But over the last, say, 10 or 15 years, as we have really grown, especially globally through mergers and acquisitions, that's really changed the landscape for us in terms of our automation and our support network and internal resources. And so while in our North American sites, we still are very much based internally in terms of a support structure, when you look outside the U.S., then that is not the case for us. In a lot of cases, we don't necessarily have much of a support staff at those locations, especially the smaller sites. And so in those cases, we're relying more on third-party integrators or the suppliers themselves or some combination of that. So that's really changed the landscape for us and really has us looking overall at what we do going forward in terms of a corporate solution more consistently as far as just overall support of our automation systems corporately.
Go ahead, Jacco.
Yeah, okay. So for Shell, we have a broad set of sites all over the world, and the automation solutions that are used there are in the same range. It's a broad set of systems we use. Luckily, we've always had the approach of keeping the system relatively current. So that makes life a lot easier if you look at it over a long time span. Obviously, we also have 30-year-old system with people who grew up with the systems and they're going to retire with the system, or the system's even there when they retire. So that's an issue we face as well. But it's not really a big problem. The bigger problem is in our business where we're cost constrained and how do you do things cost effectively, and that's really a thing where you need to think about and work on it strategically. So you define. What we did is define actually the points in time and the steps we have to make to grow into more open systems. So that's a strategic approach. We call it lifecycle management for our systems and devices. And I think that that approach can help you to strategically prioritize those parts you need to work on. And for a big company, you have limited resources. You need to do that. So if we look at support, it's a big spread as well. So we have sites with kind of hybrid support structure where we do part of it ourselves and part of it is done by our mech supplies, as we call them. But it's a big spread. Well, people and skills is one of the things that's an issue, and also strategical choices. So you cannot do everything, and you have to do the right things at the right moment in time.
Yeah, at DuPont, it's almost identical to what Steve described. We're a specialty chemicals company, been through a lot of M&A over the last 10, 15, 20 years, still going through it. And our CEO has promised more on the horizon. So in terms of, procurement, which systems do we buy? My answer is yes. We buy everything. If you name it, we have it. I bet somewhere in one of our plants we have it. How do we support it? It also runs the gamut. The larger sites, as others described, they're probably in a pretty good self-support model. They've been doing it for several years. They've got the size and the means to do so. The smaller sites, they contract it out, local systems integrators, maybe directly with the vendor. It varies. We don't impose a corporate strategy on them. You figure out how to get the support that you need the best and most cost-effective way you can get it. We do have a couple of corporate support contracts, and that just allows us to pool our buying power where we've got enough critical mass to do so. So if we've got, say, 10 sites that use vendor X, well, rather than writing 10 purchase orders, we'll write one and allocate the costs. Very, very simply that way. That's about the extent of the centralization we would go.
Well, I think we copied. I could say detour all of the above. It sounded very similar. Your story is exactly also Evonik's mergers and acquisitions. The company came Evonik just by adding 3-4 different companies together. Procurement was always going to get a new vendor because he might give a good price to be the first one to sell us his system. Anything that is available on the market, we'll probably have it somewhere in our facilities as well. And the large sites have good first level support. The smaller ones, they don't. But recently, we put in a strategy for DCS procurement. Now, again, if procurement comes and wants to bring a completely new vendor, now we have a common agreement, and now it's only going to be one of three. So we're trying to get better in standardization to make the support process easier.
So the ExxonMobil model for support is really, we have a pretty good sized team of support people at our sites, and we have central support that can backfill and level balance or come in to assist for special skills. We still have a pretty good a team of folks who we work as a large team, and I think our corporate strategy has been to standardize our processes as much as possible, even though we do have more than one vendor, actually, in all of our systems. We do have a predominance of a single vendor, but the processes are done in such a way that everybody can follow it. But thus far, for projects, we generally have to bring in extra resources to deal with that, but we always manage it from that oversight perspective that we're going to do it the way we're doing it everywhere. And so we do staff the projects at the highest level with our own people and then fill in the resources as necessary. But luckily, we still have a pretty good big team of people and we get it done.
I thought it interesting what Julie said about really, just centralizing the support policy just for volume purchase. And I'm going to throw this open to anybody who wants to talk about it. Obviously, ExxonMobil has a lot of volume with a couple of vendors. Shell may be a little more distributed, but certainly a lot of volume there. To my way of thinking, it might be advantageous for you all to, because you're major end users, to kind of try to negotiate some kind of deals with that. What do you think keeps you from doing that? Is it the diversity of suppliers that you have, the number of plants? Why? I just kind of wonder. I can see why Exxon would do it if you have a much more uniform installed base. But I just wonder if you think about the kind of coverage that you have and the kind of policies that you have for corporate level support agreements and vendor relationships. Why do you think there's not more? Or, what do you think about that? Go ahead.
So I can talk for us. Obviously, it's a bit of a, we didn't follow the strategy Exxon followed with one major supplier actually basically, and I think there's a culture thing in each company as well. So we always as a company gave a lot of autonomy to our manufacturing sites. So they've developed, high level, all their processes look the same. But if you really dive into the details, and the devil is in the detail, let's call it that way. And it's actually, that's the case. So if you really try to standardize, you start to talk about ways of working. And I actually had a trajectory this year to try and do that in our downstream business. I can tell you there's quite a few hurdles you have to hop over because, a lot of folks think that the way they do it is actually the best way. And, and it's marginal details, but, sometimes you really struggle on those details to get agreement on, on one way of working, which is essential if you go out to our suppliers. For our suppliers, this is difficult as well. I'm not saying, everything should come from our side. Or from their side, we should be able to unify ourselves and standardize on certain ways as well, which are difficult process internally. So yeah, that's a bit of an insight, but.
Yeah, I think there's also been a strategic and intentional shift, as Jacques said, to try to get support as close to the level where it's needed as possible for speed and efficiency. We don't want any sort of centralized corporate structure to get in the way of the plants getting what they need. So it shouldn't have to call me for approval to do something that they need to fix something or to keep the plant running. They just go do it. Going through me would just slow the process down. So we've deliberately tried to push things as close as possible to where they need to be for speed.
I was just going to add what Jacco said. I think for us, we have started looking at trying to get corporate agreements in place, especially from a support standpoint, based on what I just described. And some of the hurdle has been just the supplier's business model in terms of looking at how they're organized and what they'll even allow or permit in terms of a global agreement. Some of the challenges there are how they do business in the regions too, often using local business partners, for instance. And so that brings in another unique party on a regional basis, which adds challenges to that as well. And then, as we've said too, our sites tend to have very unique needs as well. We take one site that maybe is in North America that's very well staffed and they have very little needs versus one that has a small site in another region of the world that basically has no staff in place. They have a lot of needs. And so customizing that agreement on a site-by-site basis all of a sudden gets difficult. So now you no longer have this nice, consistent corporate agreement, but a very specialized fragment agreement, which at the end almost makes you question whether or not there's value at all in combining that. So it's been a big challenge, but we're trying to tackle that as we speak. So.
Yeah, at Evonik, we do have some global agreements with our main vendors, but they are basically restricted to that package that the vendors they sell for. You always get the latest version. If you want to install it, you might get a central hotline support. But when it comes to the details on site, whether they want some specific spare parts or somebody needs to be on site in a certain amount of hours, that is negotiated plant by plant. We started to work together with the vendors to maybe get some a la carte services, that we have some kind of standardized catalog where all the sites can choose from. But yeah, in the end, it's the need of the sites that determines what kind of contract they sign.
Dave, when you spoke about the systemness of your pilot and program, a lot of, as you mentioned, a lot of things are built into a vendor's DCS because of their years of architecture and experience. So let's kind of shift gears and think about the OPAS or OPAF compliant systems that are envisioned in the future, which would be characterized by being more highly interoperable and with standardized interfaces and more of a Lego model, not exactly a Lego model, but much more of a kind of Lego model between suppliers than what we see today in the process automation space. And the business guide for OPAF defines a role that you were kind of alluding to, Dave, about system integrator as a role. And so I'm wondering, who's going to fulfill that role, do you think, or who do you expect to fulfill that role in the future? Existing automation suppliers, system integrators who are there now? What do you? This is just asking for an opinion because nobody really knows, but I'd just like to know what you think about that.
So
it's an important kind of role.
Yeah.
And if you move into a world where you can go much more easily multi-vendor than you can now.
The vision we have, and I say we, the ExxonMobil team and our participation, and where we hope this all leads to, the systemness that we had to work for the prototype was because it's not bundled in a proprietary way, and the interfaces are not fully open and developed that we hope there will be. So we had to sort of put it together ourselves. The vision we have is really more of a, I hate to use the term, but plug and play idea. And you think about the kind of things you do with your phone and your PC and other technology you use, and it's easy to just add stuff together and it recognize. I mean, there was a day when we had to load drivers for mice, right? And then all of a sudden it said, you want me to go look on the internet and find it? And now it doesn't care. I got it. And I think the vision we have is the standards and the interfaces become more open, and it will be much more plug and play, and it'll work right out of the box because we've agreed on the information models, the methodologies, and so the actual integration activity could hopefully go down. But I believe that the vendors and the system integrators and even the end users will always maintain some level of system integration responsibility, because even if we can integrate all the system, we have to integrate it to our business systems or some other things that we're going to live with for a while. You know, a lot of us have technology that's not going away.
Well, that raises a question in my mind. What I see is that the way that you might rely on a partner or a set of partners for support of a particular unit or a particular process, whatever the domain is, a lot of times if there's a kind of close reliance with a supplier for that level of support, and maybe maybe a system integrator, maybe a supplier, how can that go forward in an environment like that when you have, is that perception wrong? Do you see a need for kind of a primary support supplier for your areas like this?
I think so. So when we were going through the process of identifying Yokogawa to be our system integrator, we talked to a lot of companies, and many of them are, they're not vendors, shall we say, but they're willing to enter in agreements to support systems they've built and ongoing support, very similar to the way the vendors do. So the marketplace is adjusting to what is possible, and that's why I think also vendors will, embrace the effort of being a system integrator. We've made the case actually in the past in presentations that they're already system integrators, because the servers and the PCs we're buying aren't from them; they're from another company that makes computers. And there's other things that we know that they're integrating into their systems. So we think they're actually pretty good system integrators already. We're always going to need support because we can't have unlimited bench of support within our company. And then there's just specialty skills. But I think the OPAS business guide is sort of laid out. There's ways to participate in this ecosystem for everybody. And you can have more than one role if you want to.
Other comments? Jacco?
Yeah, I'd like to add something. So as chairman of the business working group, this is in our own, but it's not going to go away. So our existing systems, and that's a discussion we have lots of times, is not going to go away. Our installed base, we're not going to throw that out overnight. So we foresee, as Julie already said, we're not going to put as much steel in the ground in the next decades that we did the last 10 years. So reality is that we are going to expand, and we're going to implement new systems, and on top on the site we will actually start using this new technology, which doesn't mean we're going to throw away all the old technology. And so there will be a coexistence, certainly for a long period of time. We will need our support we have today, and that raises the question: isn't that model going to be more expensive because you need even more support? So that's a discussion we have, and so those questions are being asked in the business working group. We are writing things about that. We are discussing those out, and overall, I think we do see that there's a pathway from where we are today to the next stage and beyond, because as I said, we're not going to throw stuff away, but we're going to move into this new era, and we want those new capabilities. And that was said before as well. We're forced to do that. It's not upon us to decide whether we want that or not. Our C-suite wants us to be able to put in those capabilities on our platform. And if it doesn't happen through gradual migrations or gradual additions of that capabilities, then we will be forced to do it in different ways. Because, probably other, competitors in our markets will do it differently, and they'll be more successful. So our markets, which are not necessarily the control systems market, but our own markets will force us to do things as well, because we have relatively low capability to add a lot of margin, and with our current systems, we are limited there. We're at the tops of what we can do. We can do incremental improvements, but not big steps. So we need new technology to make the big steps with our existing kit, and that's the capability we need. So no matter what, we don't want to throw away our old stuff. But on the other hand, we do need the new capabilities. So that's where OPAS is actually an excellent vehicle to embark on and to go for.
Well, let me follow that up with another question then, Jacco. You mentioned talking about cost in the business team, and this doesn't have to be just for Jacco, but when you make an investment decision, you're looking about the value that it might deliver, that you expect it to deliver, and the investment that you have to make. And if you're talking about a more complicated system, you need a more complicated support structure potentially. The cost might be there, but you might be getting value. I wonder what the thinking is among people in the OPAF organization about what that support structure might look like, and whether how it would be justified in terms of value delivered, greater value delivered, and higher or lower costs. What have you guys thought about that? I'm just.
I mean, I think in general, there's a desire for costs to go down. I'm just going to say that, right?
Yeah, well, everybody likes that, for sure.
And so also, I think we've had a strategic shift over the years to differentiated business management, where, the businesses that are growing, they're going to get more capital. They can, maybe afford to do some things that the other businesses where the market's contracting a little bit, they're not going to be expanding. They've got to hunker down a little bit more. So, this idea of a one-size-fits-all support model just doesn't hold up in that kind of environment. And I think it'll be no different with OPAS.
Okay. One other thing I would kind of like to ask is to kind of, if you would look at other kinds of services that your company buys, and I'm thinking of things like IT services, maybe specialty materials or feedstocks, instrumentation services, APC services, maybe mechanical maintenance for critical mechanical parts, design and engineering services on a project installation, those kind of things. How do you compare that with automation? I'm thinking especially more of IT kind of services, and for more open automation systems. Can you see that kind of system going out for bid to different people as a support role or a system integrator?
You have to break it down. You can't, by areas of IT. We're very converged on, let's say, desktops. Right? Everybody has a Dell. You're not allowed to, bring in an HP. No, you're going to have a Dell. Here it is. It's assigned to you with the serial number. But other services, there's still a lot of differentiation. We've got about 4 different versions of SAP running our enterprise. We've got 4 different process historians. Not a lot of energy to converge that. There's really not. Perhaps there's an even bigger hurdle with some of the ERP level systems. An SAP migration project is very expensive. So the activation energy to do that is maybe almost on par with a automation system migration project. So I'm not sure I see a lot of it beyond just the desktop support level of, all right, using, Microsoft Office.
So what I would say to that question is, if the systems are standards-based, they're easier to use. And one of the original philosophies we were talking about within the Exxon team is, can we make the process of evolution and of automation more of a maintenance activity and less of an engineering activity? So if we can make it simple, robust, easy to do, safe to do, and use resources that are don't have to have the specialized education or specialized capability, then naturally we'll have maybe a lower cost structure to implement what we're doing. We'll be able to do it quicker, faster. We talk about granularity in our own mental model of what we might do, that we don't have to buy systems in large chunks, and we'll be able to, even when businesses are challenged, they'll be able to make small incremental improvements, maybe not big incremental improvements, but small ones, because the technologies and the interoperability will make it so much easier to add capability. And then, of course, something that a business that's doing very well adds to the system can be shared with the same people in another part of the world that are maybe more challenged in the business world. So I think that the economics could change. As far as support goes, well, so many people can take care of their other technologies today, whereas it used to be more specialized, and it might have, at one point, it was sort of vendor-based. And so now, it's just a generic skill people have. It's been made simple, made reliable, and the technology's enabled that. And I think that's our desire, that it changes the cost profile of what we do with the systems. And whether it goes up or down as a market force, I can't see, but I can see a lot of reasons it'll get easier and cheaper and faster, and I don't have to have specialized resources to do it. I can, the more generally pick somebody to do it. I mean, ultimately, we hope that the piping mechanic can go change the DCN for us. I don't have to even have a specialized control system tech to do it.
Any other comments on that?
Well, yeah. Looking back at just recent years, we've switched technology as well. So we went from single server type solutions to virtualized platforms, and our DCSs, to some extent are getting to this virtualized environment, which is actually the first step in, subtracting the hardware from the software and just making that split. That's already one thing that's happening today, and that also already shows that, yeah, sure, you need different skill sets, you need different people, but it's also a skill set that's more available on the market today than the skill sets that are available for the proprietary maintenance work on systems. And looking at the current base of systems we have, if you look at how much effort we have to put in to upgrade our systems, man, that's a lot of work. That's a huge amount of work. And once we get it to the upgrade by repair type systems, that's probably going to make the whole case to make the switch, because that those upgrades are going to come and they're going to stay on, and it's going to continue over time. So that's that's not going to go away, and that's one of the things we're faced with, and we get less resources as well. So we need to get that problem out of the way, and one way to do that is keeping on track with the technology that's there.
Yeah, I guess just to add to that, we're doing control system migration projects now only because we have to. You do them when they're a must, and you don't ever do them again, hopefully for at least another 20 years. And perhaps with OPAF, it will be never. Perhaps we can get to this upgrade by repair, or at least be able to incrementally take advantage of new technologies without having to do a wholesale migration project, because they're extremely painful, they're extremely disruptive, there's no return. So getting the money, you do one now, you don't even think about asking for any more money for quite a while. You've got to be able to find a way to, on a maintenance budget, incrementally improve the system.
I'll say too, maybe as a different perspective on that question and answer is, you ask us to think about, compare and contrast the support services purchased in the automation world versus other things in our company, like IT, like valves, design, engineering, installation, that sort of thing. I'll say, as I mentioned, that historically in the automation space, we've been very internalized in terms of our support model. And so I'll say in some of these others, I'll say that some of these other areas within our company have probably been a little more open-minded and a little more creative in terms of leveraging some innovative solutions that are being offered and provided by the suppliers within those spaces. And so we probably have a way to go in the automation space, at least within our company, thinking about some new novel models and techniques in terms of leveraging support services and support models that some of the other areas in our company have already started taking advantage of.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. We've done similarly. We use EPC firms for design and construction of facilities. We don't self-perform in that. That shift happened 10 years ago at least. So yeah, it's the wave. The wave just keeps going.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the way
Go
is
ahead.
only standardization, because then you will be able to have easier maintenance or have fewer people work on that. Yeah. In the meantime, we see things actually getting more complex. There was a lot of talk about cybersecurity, so everybody is eager to keep their systems up to date. Do you put in the patches automatically? Well, you probably want somebody to look at that. And we just did the calculation on one of the medium sites we have, and if we wanted to patch all the computers on a regular basis, there would be 2 FTEs just for that one site, and they wouldn't do anything else but putting in patches into the computer. So
Sounds
the
like you
service
need a better
is
way to
actually
do that.
It's actually getting more of a problem at the moment.
Okay, I have a lot more questions here, but I think at this point you've been very patient with my questions, and now it's time to answer yours. So, is Alan here still? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, there are a few questions from the floor, so please get the mic from Alan and identify yourself and ask your question.
Hey, good afternoon. Brian Clemens, Dow Inc. I'm really encouraged by what I'm hearing from the panel. Dave, I appreciate what you said about building these skills and deploying skills in such a way we're doing maintenance, and this should be really middle skills. We have a habit of engineering these systems from cradle to grave, and I don't believe that's necessary. And I do sense a sensitivity to vendors and integrators in the concern that they'll be innovated out of a job. And I want to say that is absolutely wrong. How many projects don't get done because we're resource strapped? In my career, I've never heard anyone say we have too many resources. I've never heard anyone say we're able to do every project we want to do. Can the panel comment on that? What more do you think will be done?
The other thing we've never heard is we have too much money. Right? I just can't spend it all. I don't know what to do.
Now, I did hear that, in the stimulus era of like 2009, 2010. In some industries, they had that problem, but that's the only time I ever heard that. Any other? Dave?
I was going to say, we've heard you have too much money. We don't, yeah. No. I think your point is, or where you were leading, at least in my own mind, I look at where the vendors do and are starting to offer services. There are some tasks that we do that have to be done. They're just the basic, blocking and tackling of running facilities and that kind of thing. And we see vendors getting very creative in offering those services. And what that does is it offloads our resources to do maybe more value-added stuff. I mean, it's just the basic, taking care of, you have to take care of business and you only have so many resources. So the ability to provide a more efficient or more effective resource to do some of these things and help us with special information or special insights. Many companies are realizing that the massive number of specialists in various areas is dwindling. They're retiring, there's people not replacing them, our businesses want to do more with less. And so you get into the situation, well, how do you do the same workload with less, much less, more with less. And so I think there's plenty of room in the marketplace for additional services, helping us with things that are, mundane routine for us, but just offloading that gives us a break. And then we can find those innovation ideas for our companies to push, get that more part.
Yeah, so getting back to what you said and what Dave just said, we did a study in the last year on, where are people, what are people doing working in the systems, the process control system space and the process control engineering space. And a lot of the work was really, work we actually don't want to do. Yeah, and if you get these new systems with the capabilities we intend to build them with, or that takes away a lot of that grunt work, if you will, and allows those that whole workforce to do smarter things, because they're smart people. We hire smart people, and they're expensive. They are smart, and we give them jobs that 50% of the time they do stupid work. And because it's a repetitive thing, we need to do it. It's like I don't have to mention all the tasks, but you know what I'm probably referring to, and that's really what we try to avoid with this new technology. People can way more focus on the goodies, on the nice things. We can actually be as an industry, coming from the oil and gas, we're not attractive for the new kids on the block. Getting this new technology in and given the capabilities and still the margins and the stuff we can do with the new technology, we can become more attractive to them as well. So for us, it's also important to make sure that message comes out, because now we hire PhDs from university, and then we give them a system that's 30 years old, and then say, now you have to build this, and we give them impossible configuration tools and all that sort of stuff. You don't want people to do that, and then on top they have to do grunt work as well. So guess how long they stay? And so that's a thing we need to overcome.
Hey, there's a question from Jim here.
Yeah, Jim Montague, Control Magazine. I just wanted to know what Shell and Eastman expect to get from, OPAS, what you expect it to bring you, and then if you guys might have any, if all of the end users might have any advice for, other potential end users about approaching OPAS, and, how can they convince their own organizations to let them join?
I could start and say one of the things I didn't share early on when I was kind of describing our landscape is that we have a myriad of systems from a myriad of suppliers and a myriad of generations of those across our sites. Even at a single large site, we've got numerous different systems. And so those technology differences right now are huge barriers for us in all kind of ways. We just talked about resources and skill sets. And so I have an organization of 55 people that supports the systems at our headquarters site. We have 60 DCS systems, again, from a myriad of suppliers, myriad of platforms, 850 PLCs of 40 different vintages. And so it's difficult for us to cross-train folks across those. So we have folks very siloed right now because of the lack of interoperability and the lack of tools that span these technologies. So for us, I would say the interoperability piece is by far the most attractive piece of this, to think that we could develop a skill set in someone and have them work on almost any system across our site of any vintage is extremely attractive and almost incomprehensible based on our current landscape today.
Yeah, I think I kind of agree with you on that, but I want to add something there as well. Is like, at this current date, we're not able to use best-in-class solutions over all our systems. So we use the solutions we get from the supplier simply because we need to use them. Now, if we get that capability, we can first get rid of a lot of tools we're using, or programs, whatever you can think of if you talk about a best-in-class solution. But it also opens up a lot of other capabilities, for other solutions that you can actually spread over the system. So if you ask me what's the benefit of of a more open system, then that's certainly one of the huge benefits you get. And I think that's interoperability between the systems. Yes, that's certainly something we want. So we have sites with a multitude of DCS systems. Bringing those systems into, for instance, one control room environment, it's quite challenging, I can tell you. So if you have the open standard, you no longer have to worry about those things. And that's really, that's only 2 examples. There's lots of use cases where I would say, if you join us, you can make use of the use cases, and there's many, which can actually help you, think about your own strategy and what you need to work on. But there is certainly a lot of use cases that will help you, understand where the benefits are.
Yeah, I guess I fully agree with everything these 2 gentlemen have just said, but also to answer the other part of the question, if you're not a part of the forum now and you're thinking, should I join or not, what's in it for me, why sit back and let others shape what your future is going to be, right? I hate when a standard just lands in my lap with a plop that now I've got to comply with. I want to be part of shaping it so that I can, kind of mold it and make it the way that, I think is going to benefit me ultimately. Because if you don't, it will end in your lap because it's happening. It's real. It's coming. I know that, maybe 4 years ago or so, there was definitely a lot of disbelief that, this will never take off. This is never going. I think you're hearing, from earlier today, and if you see some of the prototypes in the room, it's real. I mean, it's going to happen. Maybe you can't buy it today, but you will. It's coming. So, have a voice in it. Shape it. Make sure that it's going to be for you.
Can I add to that?
Sure.
So I'm going to turn my head now as a chairman of the business working group, but we're going to do outreach as well to companies who are not members, because we do understand that there are smaller end user companies who struggle to, get the workforce in our space. So we need to hear them as well. So we encourage you to, stay tuned in this space, and we'll reach out to you through whatever kind of platforms you're in to get your voice heard as well, because I think that's really important. Not everyone can be in, and I agree with Julie, you should be in, but if you really tried very hard and you couldn't, there's still those moments where we have the touch points in it. For us, it's really important to hear all your use cases, all your requirements, so we can actually make use of that common knowledge, so we can build together and shape together.
Okay, there's
I just want to add something too. I'm not sure, but I think Eastman is maybe currently the most recent OPAF member. We just joined about a week and a half ago, so there may have been another member since, but I think we hold that designation at least at this point in time. But I'll just say to answer the question too. I mean, Julie was a big proponent. She was big in us coming on board. And of course, for several years, I've followed OPAF and been very excited about what I see them at least attempting to do. And so I'll say that we've got a lot of folks within our company organization that are really questioning whether or not it'll happen and whether or not it'll really come to fruition. But I will say that our decision to join was, as we looked at it, to their point, we felt like there was some value to be gained in us being at the table and not only having input, but having better understanding about what is coming. And I'll say, too, that at least our belief is, and I may feel differently as we get into it, but the membership is set up so that it's fairly easy to join and get out. And so we're honestly joining for this year as a trial. And so we've got a year with our membership to basically get involved, kick the tires, so to speak, and see if there's really value there for us as an end user being a part of this. And if at any point in time we decide it's not, then we can discontinue our participation and certainly not recommit and renew. But we're doing it at least this year as a trial to see if there is truly value that we believe there is in the overall effort. So.
Okay, other questions from the floor? Luis, no question, I guess, huh? Anybody else have a question? There's one over here from Mark.
Julie, you mentioned you migrate when you absolutely have to because it's so painful. Do you figure into your quantification of when you migrate a very painful system, lost opportunities for functions that you don't have, that you would like to have, be more flexible, be faster to market? Does that figure into your calculation of when you finally do a migration?
It does, certainly. We try to look at the upside, what is the new technology going to bring? But unfortunately, the reality is capital is very scarce, and it's tooth and nail to get something, that doesn't have a really solid return. If you incrementally, put in another skid that's going to get you, more output, that's a real return. People can see it and get behind it. But replacing this system with another system, okay, it's got more functionality. That tends to be seen by the C-suite as bells and whistles. Okay, that's nice, but, how do I really get more pounds out the door? How do I improve my quality? It's difficult to make those connections. So that's why a lot of times, we run systems past their end of life. One thing, and Jac touched on it earlier, that's maybe starting to make it a little bit easier is as we're seeing the newer generation workforce coming in. Current college graduates are looking at some of these older technology systems and saying, what? We've got some sites that, they're still on VAX-based technologies. Nobody graduating today knows what a VAX is, right? That was all before they were born, right? So they're like, I don't want to work on this. Yeah. So that's going to take a little while as we get enough critical mass, but that could be actually a stronger factor than technology.
Maybe just a little bit of addition to what Julie said. When we upgrade our current systems, we do not get huge amounts of additional capabilities. So I think, that's one thing we're faced with. It's limited. The extra capabilities we get for the upgrades is actually, to sustain business, and the additional capabilities are relatively limited. So that's why we're struggling with getting the funds. It's always a negative NPV, and it's the least negative NPV that wins in this case when you do upgrades. But with newer systems, we do think that there can be even a positive NPV. So it does make sense to look at those, and it will be seriously stupid if you wouldn't look at those, because it's your business. And certainly if you're in a red ocean type business environment, I'm not sure who know the terminology, but you need to look at cost and how you can actually grow, and that's
Okay. I'm surprised, Julie, that you said that in the public domain about that. Excuse me for laughing, but I thought I had been in the only plant that was running VAX emulation software for their tools, but I guess you have some too.
We inherited several of them with our recent merger and acquisitions.
Okay. Well, no,
We're struggling
you're
to have a support
you're not
them.
alone. You may be embarrassed, but you're not alone.
I still miss some BMS features.
Okay, other questions from the floor? I'm having trouble seeing because of the lights, but I don't know. There's some other questions here. Don't let me ask them because really mine aren't that good. So,
Hi, my name is Jeff Klassen. I work for SI Group. We're a relatively small chemical company. These concepts are great, but my company doesn't have the bandwidth really to participate in any of this stuff. how can we actually help, push this agenda forward? Because I have a very strong interest in utilizing some of these technologies once they're proven, but can't really help be part of that process.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think Jac mentioned it earlier. We're going to be targeting users like you this year with some requirements workshops. They haven't been scheduled yet, but this is exactly why we want to get the end users to participate, even if it's tangentially. See if you can be part of these requirements workshops to say, this is what I want the system to look like. I can't be part of the week-to-week meetings and come to all the forums, but you can at least get your requirements in such that they're considered as part of the standard.
May I add something to that?
I'm sorry, who's?
This is Alex.
Oh, where's Al? I don't see you.
We could really use independent reviewers. If you could join and just review things that we're putting out, that would be a huge help. In fact, having a reviewer who is not involved is a real asset, because you'll look at it with a fresh set of eyes and tell us where we've gone off the rails. And I really, really would love to have people, if you don't have time to participate, that's fine, but review the documents for us. That would be a huge blessing. Sorry to preempt your panel.
That's not a problem.
Great suggestion.
Julie, I would just like to follow that up. Maybe could you tell people how they would get involved in these kind of workshops or other activities without formal membership in the organization and participating in week to week? What steps should they take to kind of identify themselves?
Yeah, so we're actually preparing that. We had offline discussions this week, and we'll have in our forum discussions later this week. We will talk about that. Well, the basis will be through platforms which are already in use. So you might be a member of a certain group of end user companies. We will approach those. So as a trial, we did an outreach to a WIB. That was easy because I'm a board member in WIB. Which is an end user, platform in the Netherlands, and lots of smaller companies are a member of that. So I'll just call out a few names: Nourion, DSM, former Exxo, Nobel. Those companies, but they're not big enough to. But they want to stay tuned. They want to know what's happening and how they can actually, prepare for this. Well, prepare is probably difficult if you're a non-member. But at least they, pretty closely tuned in to what we're doing. That should be doable, and that's also in our interest to stay. And Alex, I wasn't surprised you were saying that. Well, thank you. But it is actually a very important thing to reach out beyond our own group, because we know that this is not the whole world. We're not representing the whole world, and we do want the whole world to know about this and make their own choices whether you want it or not. But you should at least know the content, we can share with you and have it firsthand. And that's what we were going to do. So that's something we're going to set up. So we think about each region of the world, and then convenient locations, and there obviously will be some time for you to involved. You need to come to that place and sit for a day with us. But you'll get lots in return, I think. So it's certainly going to be worth it. Not saying that if you want to shape it, again, what Julie said, be a member, because we can use new members and fresh insights and all that sort of stuff. Will be really great. But this is just another way of us trying to outreach to the entire community.
So I was going to say, we do have members who do, they participate as much as they can, realize this is pretty much a volunteer army, and many of us have day jobs that we have to do. I'm very fortunate. I'm assigned to work on the Exxon project and the forum work, so I'm very fortunate. But I know plenty of folks who are, they come when they can, and they don't come other times because, well, they got to do that thing that gets the paycheck. I would say we just finished version 2, and it will be available to non-members. So I would say stay abreast of what we're doing, read the standard, join if you can, participate if you can. But we need everybody to be in the game, and we don't have a problem with people cheering us on. We understand that, some folks have plenty of work to do outside of this, and then just anything that, if you know what we're doing and you keep abreast of the technology, and you, tell your vendors you like what you're hearing and ask them questions about where they're at on that. It's a marketplace change that we're talking about. We need benefit for our companies.
Right.
And that's why we're here.
Start asking your vendors. Are they aware? Right? Are they aware of OPAFs? Are they members? Are they participating? Do they plan to develop conformant products in the near future? You just kind of start probing a little bit.
Okay. Other questions? Looking. Here's one here.
Yeah, it's me again. Maybe a follow-up to my last question. We have end users on the stage, but there's a whole other side. There's the vendors, there's the suppliers. What's that interaction been like? What optimism have you seen come from that group? Just kind of explain how that's been working out.
So
let me just comment first.
Yeah.
The idea of this panel was to have end users, not to have suppliers. There will be suppliers participating in the Thursday open group session, I'm sure. But just to preface it that way.
The vendors are the experts at building these systems. And so it's actually very beneficial to understand. I think one of our members pointed out one day, you guys never understood the sausage making process. There's a lot to it. And I have a much deeper, understanding and respect for that effort. They bring a lot of technology and a lot of understanding of what's possible. They also, at times, explain the difficulties of making certain choices. I'll say over time, they can see how it is a way their businesses can go. Because you got to imagine the disruption. And, it's going to be disruptive for all of us in the plants trying to figure out how to implement this technology and learn some new skills maybe, or harmonize some skills. But the vendors have the same kind of issues. I mean, they need a marketplace. They need to stay in business. Our goal is not to run them out of business. We need them. We need them to be our partners and to help us to become system integrators. But we also need to allow others into this marketplace who have pretty much been locked out by the proprietariness. So I think the way the Open Group builds their consortiums, that the forum is, they try and balance the needs of users, the needs of vendors and suppliers, and generally the health of the marketplace. I think that's why the business guide was the first document we published, not a standard guide document.
Yeah, I think there also just needs to be, and there's starting to be, a recognition that the world is changing, right? Supply models are changing, disruption is everywhere, right? So this is just another form of disruption. And the challenge with it all is you're not disrupting just for the sake of disrupting, but you also hope that you can enable new opportunities for growth. You can make the pie bigger. Right? It's not just a question of where we got this fixed size pie and we're going to divide it up between these 8 vendors. Everybody gets 1/8. No, the pie needs to grow. It needs to open opportunities for them to get into other areas that maybe they're not able to get into today. I think that's possible. We've certainly seen it in adjacent industries like IT. So, we'll see as it moves forward. But I think there's a lot of opportunity out there.
One other thing I would just make a comment about that point is that both suppliers that are engaged in this open process automation forum and those that are not, as well as third parties, I think recognize and do kind of strategic planning with respect to seeing potential disruption from a lot of different directions. And that's kind of what they do as a normal course of strategic planning, is to think about what can disrupt their business that really doesn't make a change for them. But I'd say the Open Process Automation Forum is certainly another dimension to that potential disruption. But these companies are on the lookout for that all the time, as just part of their regular planning process, and every one of them is. Okay, we have a question from Alex.
Just one comment before you close. Even if you're not a member, there's something you can do that would make a big difference. And that's on your RFQs, ask your vendor what their plan is to adopt OPAF. They have to respond. It's in your RFQ. If you write stuff like that in the RFQs, not saying you have to say that you have to buy OPAS compliant stuff yet, but just ask the question. Raise the visibility. That doesn't cost anything to add that to your questions.
That's exactly the approach we are running with the MTP. And there is a standard now out there. It's not fully complete, but we encourage all NAMUR members also to put that in the RFQs. And we want something that is MTP compatible. And it doesn't cost that much, and it raises the awareness in the market that there is something coming that might be important.
Okay, looking for another question. If I don't see one, I may close with one of mine. I don't want to do that, so. Anything else? Let me ask one question then, if no one else will. I would ask you maybe to identify the single greatest pain point that you have now with your supporting the automation portfolio that you're running. And I know there are multiple issues, but if you had to identify one as the biggest issue for you in today's world, what would you think that might be? Anybody want to jump in on that? Without naming any vendors, of course.
No, and it's somewhat universal. The ExxonMobil strategy is to run our equipment and run it to the very end. We get a lot of value out of it, and buying new equipment doesn't seem like a smart thing to do when you're getting a lot of benefit out of it. Now we realize that we can change the benefit equation and get more, but because we've run these systems so long and we've learned how to take care of them and run them, we are actually running systems that the people who built them and supported them for decades are retiring and leaving. And it is a tough thing to find support for some of these systems. There's a vendor who actually used the words, ExxonMobil may have some of the last people on the planet that know how that thing works. That's not a great place to be. So, the longevity and the savings from that were very positive, but now we've found ourselves in a place where it's you can't find them.
Yeah, and
it's tough.
You're not the only folks that have heard that.
Maybe the question occurs to me personally is, well, maybe we kept them a little too long. It's kind of the old car thing, right? At some point it's like no one can work on it. No one remembers how to work on it. What would you do? Yeah.
Anyone else?
Yeah, the fact that we've got so many different systems that, sites and businesses have grown up with, a cultural barrier that's created is this loyalty or perceived loyalty. Site such and such loves their Honeywell system. We love our Siemens system. We love our ABB system. Why? Well, it's because it's what you grew up with. It's because you know it, and change is difficult, and the others are different, and it's very different. I mean, in some cases, the syntax is completely different. So there's that discomfort and having to learn something new. So by having a more standardized open system, yeah, you're still going to have to learn something new, sorry, but hopefully you won't have to keep learning something new to the extent that, it's going to be an easier learning curve. It's not going to be a complete, relearn your vocabulary and how to do things. And we'll get rid of this, loyalty wars that we're fighting, the strategy in the business. Well, this other site has system A. Well, you should have it too. No, we can't. We love system B. You don't see that in the IT world, right? Nobody says, no, I love my Dell. Please don't make me give up my Dell. I don't think anyone would care if they got an HP or the next day. It's a lot less of that because it's so much more open and it's just so much more interchangeable.
When's the last time you bought a PC based on the brand of hard drive in it?
Right.
Yeah. Or your Mac, although they may not have that many hard drives. They probably, it's how big is it, not what brand is it. And it's about delivering capability and functionality, not, we believe we should have relationships with our vendors, and that's a very powerful thing. But some of it goes to irrational, for sure. What I was going to say, I run into people who like the old equipment, but not the new equipment from the same vendor. It's like, what? That's strange loyalty.
But the rationale seems to be the same everywhere. If it's not broken, don't fix it, don't replace it. Huh? But a year ago, somebody called me and he went, do you have somebody that can fix my old S5? And I said, well, you called 2 weeks too late. The last guy I had that knew this thing, he just retired. So I think that's the problems we're having everywhere. And that's the pain points. As I asked my guys that are in the operations also about those pain points, and they said, yeah, it's also changing staff on the on the supplier side, and that is as big as a problem because we don't have enough standards. So if you change people, you lose them because they retire internally or also from the external suppliers. They don't always have the same people. They send different people in, and maintenance needs more standards.
Okay, I just want to say thank you. This panel is 5 people who have very challenging roles within their companies. They're leaders within their companies, and you can see from the discussion that they've had, they're very knowledgeable and serving a very important role. And I really appreciate you all being here beyond words, and I think it would be nice for you to express your appreciation for what they shared today.